Hey y'all, thanks so much for joining me, Kelly, aka The Wandering Widow. On this show, we will address the many aspects of life after loss and the journey towards wellness and wholeness through exploration of self, planet, and all the relationships that we make along the way. We're going to do so with a little bit of grit, some grace, and a dose of that dark sense of humor. Hopefully you'll laugh. I'll likely cry. Everything's fine. Well, it's the happiest time of year, unless you happen to be a grieving person, in which case the winter holidays, much like other holidays, anniversaries, or maybe birthdays through the year, are a little bit of an emotional minefield of really especially intense emotions and memories that bring on intense emotions, etc. So how do we, as grievers, figure out how to move through these holidays with more sanity and a little bit of grace? And how can we, as support people, ensure that we are holding safe, supportive spaces for our grievers, for the grieving people in our communities? So the first thing that we have to do is know that this is a really challenging time of year. It's very easy to forget when we do not have our own personal grief experiences and loss experiences, and we are celebrating what the majority of the world recognizes and celebrates as one of the more lighthearted, joyful, fun times of year, that there are people that are mourning, and that while potentially feeling like incredibly deep yearning for and a desire to celebrate with the rest of the world, and then of course layers of guilt for not being able to meet our fellow celebrators there. So first off, I think that as grievers, we need to grant ourselves a little bit of grace and recognize and honor, and then invite in the letting go of the guilt that we have as grievers, and as support people, allow some perhaps additional gentleness for the grievers in our lives as we all navigate the season and or holidays, anniversaries, or birthdays that we may be moving through. So allowing all of the emotions that come up is truly vital to making it through and not making it worse. When we force down those feelings and we don't allow for whatever is attempting to come up, we just make ourselves more miserable. And then we end up making people around us more miserable. So just know that new waves of grief and maybe even more complex emotions that we might not have names for may come up. And depending upon the kind of loss that we are experiencing or have experienced, or the quality of that loss, there might have been a complex relationship that we had with a loved one. And as a result, in this holiday season, we might feel guilt around maybe feelings of freedom or feelings of happiness within the holidays that we had not had the opportunity to experience before because of that complex relationship. Or perhaps we feel torn when you do experience a little bit of that lightness, and then you feel the immediate sadness that you can't share that same lightness of experience with our lost loved one. Or perhaps the joyful expression of the seasonal celebrations just make us really pissed off and angry because as we are feeling through all of these emotions, we don't know that we will ever feel joy again. And we don't know that we will ever be able to laugh again. And being faced with the constant reminder that so many other people are having those joyful and light experiences can make us feel angry. And then we feel guilty because we feel angry because we don't want our other loved ones and community to also experience this grief and loss that is in our own lives. So Just recognizing that there are all kinds of complex emotions and that those complex emotions are normal, natural, and are allowed. Please allow them to flow. Recognize each one of those emotions. Give it the space that it might need to be felt, because forcing ourselves to celebrate and faking that holiday cheer is just going to slow down our healing and integration process. And I understand and know that I am saying this from a point in my own experience that doesn't involve children and doesn't involve a caretaker role. So I also recognize and honor that those experiences create some additional layers of challenge and expectation that are put upon you. So just know that I see you and I recognize these challenges, and simultaneously encourage you to be honest with any of those little people or family members that you are caretaking of. Just being as honest as you possibly can, obviously with the awareness of age-appropriate communication. And I can't imagine how difficult that might be and must be. So do recognize that asking for help is going to be really vital for ensuring that you're able to navigate those waters. And setting some really clear expectations and boundaries is incredibly important for all of us, for all of those of us that are moving through a grief experience throughout the holidays and beyond. So as grievers, we have to be able to utilize our voice, and we have to be able to set clear boundaries for ourselves and for our communities, for those people that surround us. And that can be a challenge in the best of the best of situations, is being able to really own and utilize our voice. One side effect of the grief experience and loss experience seems to be that we are stripped down, and we're stripped so close to our core of being that sometimes speaking up for ourselves is a little bit easier, because all of the pleasantries and all of the imposed expectations of being like super polite and appropriate, all that shit just seems to kind of be stripped away by the harshness of loss and of grief. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to speak up for ourselves. And if that's not the case for you, then perhaps we have the opportunity to identify in your life a really reliable, trustworthy, and safe support person that you may have, that you can utilize as an advocate for you, to communicate to your network of people for you in a way that might feel helpful. Just remember that you're in charge. You as a griever are in charge of your experience moving through the holiday season. You get to decide what you're capable of and what is going to feel okay for you and what is not going to feel okay for you. And also know that that can shift and change moment to moment and day to day, and maybe even within an experience. Maybe you thought that you really wanted to go to a party and be surrounded by your fellow loved ones, and you get there and it's too much. It's too much happy. It's too much joyful. It's too much couples and friends laughing and having a good time, and you are all of a sudden not comfortable being there. That's okay too. You can remove yourself. You don't have to continue on and put yourself in or hold yourself in situations that you don't feel good in. You get to decide what feels good to you. So that being said, a gentle reminder that oftentimes with a loss, you are not the only one in your support circle that is grieving. So it's very easy to get caught up in our solitary experience, especially if that loss was very close to us. And we, as grievers, need to at least attempt to keep in mind that our support circle of family and friends is probably also grieving. And they may be grieving in a very different way than we are. And they may also need support. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to necessarily, as someone who is closer to that loss, offer that support. But it is notable to mention that they are likely also grieving. And as support people, it's helpful to remember that when a loss happens very close to you, it's difficult to remember that other people are grieving, because that experience is so solitary and so individual and often isolating, even if we do have a community of individuals that are available for support. So all the more reason to really attempt to utilize your voice and communicate what is going to feel good and what is not going to feel good. So a perfect example of this, which is a horrible lived experience for my mother, I'm sure, but hopefully a learning experience that I can share with you, the listener. When my brother passed away, it was very close to a Mother's Day. And my mom communicated that she did not want to celebrate Mother's Day, that she did not feel like a mother any longer. And as a daughter, hearing that was very difficult. And it was, for me, almost hurtful, because I, as her daughter, wanted her to feel loved and appreciated and supported and held. And I wanted her to remember that her family, that she did have other children, and that her family lifted her up, and that especially in these moments that we wanted to celebrate her and wanted her to remember how loved and supported she was by her children. And that was not helpful to her. It highlighted the fact that those items of support, those pieces of celebration, that Mother's Day card that she got and that gift that I purchased for her was from me, and that she was not going to get one from my brother Kevin. And that highlighted her loss, and it highlighted her grief, rather than what I wanted to do was to soothe her grief and soothe her loss. But she used her voice, and she communicated to the family what would feel best to her. I know better and will do better, and hope that sharing this story may help you as a listener with grievers that are in your life to know that when something like that is communicated, we don't get to decide what's best for the griever. If they've communicated what is going to feel good to them, then we as a support person, regardless of our own grief experience and regardless of what it is that we want for our loved ones that are also grieving, we don't get to decide for them. And we need to honor and support them in ways that they say feels good in their own experience. So in retrospect, I believe what I should have done, what should have happened, what may have felt more supportive to my mom, was just honoring her request to not recognize the day. And if I felt as though I wanted to share the pieces of a gift and or a card, perhaps holding that for a different day and making it a gift and or card of love and support, rather than specific to a mother love and support message that may have felt more supportive to her. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, something that was very helpful to me in my own grief experience was with holiday parties and celebrations. I have a very dear friend, Jillian, who hosted a gathering every Christmas Eve for friends and close family members and close friends. And while I did not think that I was going to be able to be present for such event, Jillian made sure that she invited me, because she wanted to make sure that I felt invited, that I wasn't forgotten. So again, not making the assumption that just because someone is in a grief experience that they don't want to be invited and they don't want to be involved. If those invitations stop to parties and other experiences, that again, that can feel isolating. Then we've communicated to the griever that we don't think, one, that they're capable of showing up and being present, or two, that we don't want them to show up with all of their grief baggage, which again can feel icky and isolating. So Jillian made sure that she extended that invitation to me, and then she also extended communication after the fact, saying, hey, if you show up, that's wonderful. We would love to have you. Also know that if you don't show up, or can only show up for a few moments and then feel like you need to leave, that's okay. And if you tell me that you are going to show up and then decide the last minute that you can't, that is also okay. So she really opened the door to allow a multitude of different reactions. So, as we're utilizing our voice and as we are communicating our boundaries with our loved ones, this is also a really good opportunity for us to explore not just what we don't want to do or what we're not capable of doing, but also an opportunity to explore what might feel good to do or what might feel good to start doing. So, the holiday is never going to feel the same. It just isn't. It's never going to feel the same because it won't ever be the same. It's not the same. It will always feel different. And while that statement truly does still to this day feel awful to say, it remains true. And in that truth, we can also find a bit of freedom. And that freedom allows us to create something new and something different. So maybe this is the year that you go away for the holiday. You've always talked about wanting to go, to the beach or to the mountains. So maybe this is the year that you try to do that. Or maybe you go out to eat rather than cooking. Or maybe you decide that you want to cook just the special items that your loved one really enjoyed. Or maybe this is the year that you choose to volunteer your time in a different or special way. And then maybe thinking about, well, what would feel honoring to our loved one that might also feel supportive and sweet to me as a griever? I know that some people find it helpful to set a place for your loved one at the table. Lord help me, for me, that makes me teary-eyed just thinking about it. So that's not one for me. And also a note that not all things work for all grievers. Some other people, myself included, would light a candle for the loved one in a very special location of the home that is just representative of the light that they still hold in our lives. Perhaps we say a prayer or read a poem with our family that is reminiscent of our loved one that is lost, or we give a donation, perhaps in the loved one's name. Maybe you purchase a special ornament in memory of your loved one that you hang on the tree every year. Maybe that's something that you start to do yearly. So there are all different kinds of things that we can explore in terms of new tradition or things that might feel different. Because it is a different holiday, it will always feel different. So what are some things that we can do to make it feel sweet and different? So in exploring what we're emotionally capable of and communicating to our people, we're also working towards having a plan in place for the actual day. So in all of the things that we can do for ourselves leading up to a holiday or an anniversary, I have found this to be, and my clients have found this to be, the most helpful and important. So having a plan, and also knowing that the plan can change and that your mood and emotional capabilities may change, so the plan may have to change, and that's okay. And having a plan in place versus being at the total mercy of the day and of the waves of grief is having a plan is more helpful than just tumbling around in there. So we're not disallowing the feelings of grief. So, having a plan does not mean that we're shutting off our feelings. It is creating a path for ourselves to move with the grief rather than being swept along violently or haphazardly through the day by our grief alone. So I've done it both ways. And I can say from experience for myself and through feedback of clients, having a plan is much more helpful, and we are much more likely to disassociate and disconnect and wallow in our grief when we don't have a plan. And perhaps you have a plan A and a plan B. So for example, plan A might be on Christmas morning, I'm going to make myself a special breakfast, allow myself to cry as much as I want to in the morning, and I'm going to meditate, and then I'm going to journal about what I'm grateful for in this year and in Christmases past. I'm going to get to my family celebration at 1 p.m. I'm driving my own car so that just in case I need to escape, I can. I'm going to stay for lunch, and I'm going to leave by 3 o'clock. Everybody there knows I'm leaving by 3 o'clock. I might not say goodbye to everybody because I just need to break free. Everybody knows that. And I know that I can stay later if I'm feeling up to it. And when I come home, I've got my comfy PJs set out. I know I'm going to climb into those. I'm going to light a fire. I'm going to watch my favorite movie, take a bubble bath, and I'm going to go to bed early. Maybe plan B is I'm going to wake up and have breakfast for myself and just check in and see how I feel. I'm going to journal about whatever's coming up, and I'm going to call my family and let them know if and when I might be coming to the gathering. And if I stay home, I'm going to watch these movies. I'm going to order some Chinese food to have it delivered by 1 p.m. I'm going to call my friend or support person at about 4 and have a check-in. They know that I'm going to potentially call at 4 to check in and share some holiday wishes and just let them know kind of how I'm feeling and what might feel supportive to hear. And that's my plan B. So when we're creating these plans, this might be a really wonderful opportunity for us to reflect and identify if there might be a new tradition that we want to fold in that would commemorate the relationship, the very intimate relationship that we have with our loved one that is lost. So something that might be specific and supportive for just us rather than something that you are communicating would be supportive when you're within a group of people. So for example, every morning on Christmas morning, Clint and I would get up, we would have mimosas after a slow morning of just taking our time getting up. We would make cinnamon rolls and we would exchange a $25 or under gift with each other. Moving forward after his death, I decided that I would continue to do this. I would make cinnamon rolls, I would make myself my mimosa, and I would purchase a gift for myself that I thought he would purchase for me. So that is a very different gift than one that I would purchase for myself. Knowing my husband and knowing the way that he purchased gifts and knowing the way that he saw me and the things that he thought that I would enjoy were often very different than things that I would purchase for myself. And years previous, he purchased me things like Nerf guns and special forms of media that I wouldn't ever have purchased for myself, like special DVDs that, back when there were DVDs that you would purchase. So things like that. So that offers me the experience of kind of getting into his headspace and remembering how he saw me and what our relationship felt like in the realm of gift giving and Christmas and that sweetness. So that's just an example of something that I do for myself, but I encourage you as a griever to really reflect upon some items that might feel very personal and helpful in your own experience moving through those anniversaries and birthdays and Christmases. So when we're making these plans for any of those special days that may be challenging for us, it's important to remember that we can only focus on controllables. So there are always going to be surprises that catch us off guard. And those moments are going to cause waves of grief that we didn't expect and when we didn't expect them. So I was grocery shopping the November after Clint passed, and I walked past an end cap of Little Debbie holiday cakes that he liked. And I gave him such a hard time about because he would eat an entire Little Debbie cake in one bite. So I walked past this end cap and I immediately lost it. And so bad lost it that I walked away from my cart and had to almost run to the bathroom and try to get my shit together, to try to pull myself together. So things like that are going to happen, and just know that when they do, to offer yourself a little bit of grace and understanding, because you're going to hear holiday songs playing when you're in public, and you're going to drive past locations that have special meaning to you or decorations that you maybe enjoyed with your loved one. You're going to receive greetings of celebration and expected joy from people that are outside of your support circle and immediate circle that don't realize that you've suffered a loss. We can't control everything. And knowing that we can't control everything, granting ourselves that grace to react in unexpected ways is going to help to allow the natural flow and the release of that intensity of emotion perhaps a little bit more quickly and more naturally. So the last thing that we want to do is make ourselves feel guilty and berate ourselves on top of feelings of that grief when it erupts. We erupt in tears in unexpected places. So when we force ourselves to disallow that flow of emotions, it's always going to find a way to manifest. It's going to pop up in other ways, and often those are not pleasant. Someday I'll tell you the story about how I fainted in the pillow aisle of the Home Goods. Wasn't pretty, y'all. Wasn't pretty. But, on the plus side, it was a wall of pillows, and thank God it wasn't in the glasswares aisle. So, small favors. So to help to move through some of those uncontrollables, it's helpful to create a little bit of an armory of some self-soothing resources. So I would recommend that you find a trusted therapist or grief coach. And here I would like to note that there is, in fact, a difference between those two support people. And I often encourage my clients to seek out a therapist in addition to having a grief walker help them through coaching. So I'll just note the biggest difference, like right off the top of my head, the biggest difference between a therapist and a coach is a therapist is going to help you to walk and work through and speak through any of your past experiences, anything that has happened in the past, and help you to explore how the past may be or continues to impact your current life, versus a coach who's going to focus on today, like what you're feeling today, how you're feeling today, and what we can do today and moving forward. And those are typically going to be through action-based steps that will help the client and that the client must facilitate. So both are going to advocate for your healing. Both are incredibly helpful support people. And I feel incredibly vital and helpful in moving through and with the grief process, but there are differences, and we will likely discuss those differences in later episodes. But just for today's purposes, know that both of those individuals are helpful and supportive through your healing process. In addition to a skilled therapist and or coach, or perhaps if you don't have resources to establish those connections, finding a trusted friend, friends, or family members that you know are safe spaces for support. And when I say safe spaces, I mean that they create an environment that allows all of your emotions. Someone that you can call and that can create an environment for you to be safely heard without attempting to shift or change your experience. This person is going to love you in all of your forms and in all of your pieces and parts. In addition, it could be helpful to have a massage therapist or body worker in this list of resources. As a griever, we hold so much of our pain in our physical bodies, and we often don't even recognize it because we are so disassociated from the sensations found there that falling back into them with the help of a skilled and compassionate body worker can be really helpful. So they can help to move some of those sensations, and or we can help to just recognize that those sensations are even present, so that then we can be more mindful about how we're holding our body and how we're moving our body. And when I say holding and moving our body, another resource could be yoga, dance, intuitive movement, any form of exercise. So similar to massage, gentle movement and breath can help us to kind of fall back into our physical bodies. It can help to transmute some of those denser emotions that we're holding on to so strongly or so deeply just because of our emotional landscapes being so overwhelming. And in that will help us to also set up for adequate sleep and remind us of the need for hydration. So as grievers, we often forget to take good care of our physical bodies and our physical needs because, again, we're so enmeshed in what's happening emotionally that we can neglect our basic needs. And our brain health suffers. There's some funky things that are happening in our brain as a griever already. And then when we don't get the proper hydration and we're not getting enough sleep, there are additional hormonal imbalances that can occur and make things additionally funky and make depression more likely, make depression deeper, and or make those levels of depression more difficult to move out of. So having those things set up for us, maybe setting timers on your phone to, okay, now is the time that I need to lay down and rest. Now is a segment of time that I've set out that I can just lay down and nap or just lay myself down and rest. Or reminders on your phone for drinking enough water, perhaps even getting one of those large gallon jugs and making little marks on it. Like, okay, by noon I should have drunk down to this level. And by I know that that's very simplistic, but the more simplistic structures are created and are put in place, the more likely that we're going to be able to adhere to them, because everything is topsy-turvy. So the more things that we can set in place as consistent, or that we can ask a support person to help us to create and set in place for us, the more likely we are going to be to take better care of our physical bodies. Next in that list of suggestions, maybe having a collection of things that feel supportive on your body, like comfortable clothing. Maybe you find a nice warm bath to be supportive, so you pull a basket of all of your favorite smelling bath products. Maybe you really feel soothed by a particular kind of music or band, or you feel more prone to move with a specific style of music. So you have a playlist that you have on the ready when you feel these experiences kind of pulling you deeper into disassociation or the deeper levels of the grief experience. If you are too deep in the levels of grief experience to pull any of these things aside and create this like list of self-soothing resources, perhaps this is another opportunity for you to utilize your voice, ask for some help, and have a support person to create these items for you. Create the playlist for me, please. You know what kind of music I love. It would be really helpful if I had a playlist that I could just hit, that I knew that you created for me, that would be really soothing. Could you go through some of my clothing and just pull out all of my yoga pants and sweatshirts and just put those in a special drawer? That would be really helpful. So I know I just need to go there and pull out something that's really soft and comfortable. These are just suggestions. Invitation for you to really explore what might be helpful for you to pull aside to have available in those moments or days that you need some additional gentleness. So as we move into the winter holiday season, to all of my grievers and to all of their support people, please hear me when I say that you're doing great, and that it's really important that you keep showing up. And that it's also really important that you lead with honesty of emotion, and that you can rest in the knowledge that these are just moments in time. They are not permanent. This is not permanent. And yes, it is difficult. And also, yes, you can do difficult things. And you don't have to do them alone. There is support available. Whew. So, yeah. Happy fucking holidays or something. Oh, Lord. I'll see y'all next time. You guys, thank you so much for spending your time with me. I so appreciate you. If you've enjoyed any part of this podcast, I would also really appreciate a quick review, or maybe share the podcast with someone else in your life that you think might also find value in it. If you've got ideas for things you want me to tackle in future episodes, or if you just want to share a little bit more about your own story, you can find me on Instagram at khhealingarts, or you can reach out to me via my webpage. It's khhealingarts.com. I'd love to continue this conversation and get to know you a little bit better. And as always, please know that you are loved, appreciated, and that I hope you are well in all of your wanderings. Yeah, I know that's corny. Doesn't make it less true.